Can't your kids hold off? Natalie's kids need to be fed first. That was Nolan, my sister's spouse, projecting his voice for everyone to hear, stationed by the grill as if it were his spotlight. The tongs clattered against the tray while he stacked ribs onto his son's plate, hardly sparing me a glance. Meanwhile, my son, Ethan, took a step back, his paper plate still untouched. I chose silence, flashing a polite smile that concealed the sting of his words. It felt as if I was in line for handouts, and a grown man spoke down to my child. The backyard buzzed with laughter, folding chairs scraping, and the playful smack of a beach ball against the fence. The scent of lighter fluid lingered in the air, yet all I could feel was my silence, heavy on my chest like damp sand. I'm Sophia. At 44, I hail from El Paso, Texas. I handle bookkeeping from the comfort of home for small businesses unaware of their financial leaks, until someone like me steps in. I once held a traditional job with benefits and structure. But after my divorce, and with Ethan's asthma, life took a turn. Now, I reside in the guest wing of what was once my parents' home, intended to be shared with Natalie, who began acting like she was the owner. That day, I found myself cradling a bowl of Kleslaw no one requested, observing my kids wait for food as if they were visitors at someone else's feast. Don't worry, there's plenty, Natalie called, all sugary. Just let the littles go first. Her tone had that unmistakable ring, making me feel small for noticing the inequity. Her youngest, Ellie, was 12, my daughter, Mia, was 10. I heard Ethan's stomach rumble. Go ahead and sit, darling, I reassured him. I'll fix you a plate soon. I'm happy to wait. He insisted on being strong, standing tall with his gaze cast down. That was what tugged at my heart. If you've ever stood beside your child and watched them diminish themselves to fit in where others permit, maybe you understand why I hesitated. I gripped that bowl of Kleslaw as if it glued me to the spot. If this moment resonates with you, if someone ever taught you to smile while being disregarded, know you're not alone. Maybe you've stood where I was. Hit that like button if you've witnessed your children being sidelined. Subscribe if you recognize the silent mothers who carry hidden truths. And share where you're tuning in from. I want to know how many of us were told to wait our turn. The tongs scraped again. Sophia. Nolan called over his shoulder. Can you get more napkins from inside? The kids are getting messy. He didn't mean just his kids. I nodded, not because I wanted to, but because I'd learned it was simpler than explaining my reluctance. Inside, the AC hummed loudly. I opened the drawer where the napkins always lived, even though this place wasn't technically mine anymore, not in a meaningful way. My mother's ceramic rooster still sat on the windowsill, watching over the backyard. One of those relics nobody throws away but also doesn't claim. Through the glass, laughter floated in. Ellie had smeared barbecue sauce all over Mia's shirt, and Ellie was laughing while Mia remained silent. Natalie said nothing. I walked back outside with the napkins, didn't utter a word, just handed them to Nolan and continued until I reached the patio's edge. Mia was by the lemonade cooler, arms crossed. They got 2 servings, she murmured. I haven't even had one. I'll grab you some, sweetie. She shook her head. Do they always think we're less? That phrase, that tone, in that moment, something within me twisted. Not quite shattered. Just shifted. I crouched down to meet her eyes. No, I replied softly. They may think they can treat us as lesser beings, but their thoughts don't define truth. Mia gazed down at her sandals, noticing barbecue sauce on one strap. I'm not hungry anymore. I wiped it off with a napkin and kissed her forehead. You still need to eat. What's the point? She questioned. They'll just say we're rude. There it was, my 10-year-old already grasping the game. Speak up, and you're deemed ungrateful. Stay silent, and you're invisible. I guided her to a quiet corner of the lawn, away from the coolers and chitter-chatter. I opened a folding chair and settled her in the shade. Wait here, I instructed. I'll prepare you a plate filled with everything. As I stood in line behind Natalie's children, she turned and beamed at me like we were stars in a sitcom, all bright smiles and curated charm. Has Mia eaten yet? She inquired in a light-hearted voice. Not yet. You might want to remind her not to be so choosy. Ellie will consume anything. I remained silent, staring until she finally turned away. I filled Mia's plate with care, ribs, mac and cheese, one of those buttered rolls everyone covets two of. Ethan lingered by the fence, his gaze fixed on the older boys tossing a football back and forth. I caught his glance and gestured toward the plate. Though he didn't smile, he held himself a bit taller. I passed the plate to Mia and settled down next to her. After taking a bite of the macaroni and cheese, she scanned her surroundings. Are we still camping here tonight? I hesitated, sensing the breeze shift, a chip bag rustle, and a toddler wailing near the swing set. Just for now, I replied. She nodded and returned to her meal. The sky was deepening into hues of orange, and I could catch the faint scent of the neighbor's jasmine bush beyond the fence. It was one of those details that strikes you right when you're trying hard not to let tears spill. I glanced at my daughter, who was quiet and small, almost disappearing into herself. And I realized I couldn't keep this up. Watching others indulge while my children waited for scraps felt unbearable. Pretending we were a part of this place merely because we were allowed in the yard? That couldn't continue. Uncle Ray had said it was easier if everything was under Natalie's name when I brought in the mail. The property tax envelope, already opened, had his thumb resting on a corner, pointing out something I hadn't noticed before. I dried my hands on a dish towel and took the paper, which felt thin and flimsy, the kind that folds easily when someone wants it to. Her name was the only one there, no mention of mine, even as a co-owner. I stood there in the kitchen, the ceiling fan spinning slowly, the refrigerator humming a monotonous tune, and a dog barking from down the street. Life moved on, but I remained still. I asked, did the county change their system? Even though I already knew the answer. Uncle Ray shrugged, saying, Natalie's handling all that stuff now, she claimed you were okay with it. I didn't recall granting permission, but, truthfully, I couldn't recall saying no either. I folded the letter back into its envelope, my name absent from the outside. I'm Sophia Ferrer, 44 years old. I was married for a decade, one of those relationships that seemed perfect on paper until you delved deeper into the footnotes. When it fell apart, I believed I was stepping into freedom, but often, it felt like I was just drifting. I used to work full-time at a small firm, managing payrolls and filing tax returns for individuals who thought they deserved a refund. But then Ethan's asthma worsened. Emergency room visits, nebulizers at 3 a.m., and the school nurse on speed dial, something had to give. I transitioned to freelancing, bookkeeping from home, taking on part-time jobs that paid quickly. When it was time to renew my apartment lease, I returned to this house, the one my parents spent 4 decades paying off. It was meant to be shared, a term from the will stating it should be divided equally between my sisters and me. Yet, Natalie moved in 6 months before I did, saying it was logical because her job was closer, the kids were already enrolled in a local school, and her husband didn't wish to commute. I didn't dispute it. I simply settled into the smaller room at the far end and unpacked quietly. Just 2 days later, she swapped out the curtains, declaring the old ones too dark for her tastes. I let that slide, too. It started off small, the gradual process of erasure. One less invitation, one less seat at the dining table, fewer inquiries of, what do you think? Initially, I thought I was imagining things, convinced it was temporary, that perhaps I was overanalyzing the way Natalie referred to my house whenever guests visited. Then the Christmas cards began arriving, addressed solely to the Lawsons, omitting me and my kids. I wondered if the mailmen slipped up. Maybe I was just being overly sensitive. Perhaps if I faded into the background long enough, they'd finally remember I existed. But they didn't. If you've ever found yourself standing quietly at the fringes of your own family, questioning when you became invisible, you're not alone. And if you've ever had to rewrite your memories just to persevere in the present, I want you to realize something: it's not all in your head. It's not a sign of weakness, it's the toll it takes. There's a subtle betrayal that doesn't slam doors or shout through walls, it simply forgets about you until you start believing it, too. I poured myself a cup of lukewarm coffee and perched at the edge of the kitchen stool, rereading that tax letter. It detailed the balance due, the parcel number, and the name Natalie R. Lawson. Her married name. I chose to keep Herrera after the divorce. I claimed it was for Ethan and Mia, but truthfully, it was for me. It was the only piece of me that still felt like mine. You okay? Uncle Ray asked as he rummaged through the fridge. Yeah, I replied, lying through my teeth. He took a soda and exited without another word. The envelope rested in my lap. That night, I searched the county records online, hoping to validate that this wasn't what it appeared to be. But there it was, stark and undeniable, in black and white. The named owner is Natalie R. Lawson. There are 4 of us living here. Counting everyone, that's me, Ethan, Mia, and Ben, plus Natalie, Nolan, Ellie, and Jordan, 6 total, but only I was officially accounted for. I stared at my screen until the text became a blur. My fingers felt icy and my heart constricted. I recalled the somber day we laid my mother to rest, when Natalie grasped the folded flag as if it were a trophy. Dad always assured us, both of you girls will forever have a place here. Always. I took his words to heart back then. I had faith in so many things. A cough from Ethan in the hall jolted me back, and I quickly shut my laptop. I shoved the tax envelope into my drawer, hiding it beneath a pile of receipts and invoices. Sleep eluded me that night, and when dawn broke, I avoided the kitchen. Instead, I lingered in the hallway, listening to Nolan discuss refinancing, while Natalie laughed about equity and Ellie pondered repainting the hallway pink. No one included me in their chatter. No one even acknowledged that I was awake. That's when I realized, not simply suspected or feared, I absolutely knew. They no longer recognized me. They saw just a guest. A burden. Someone so easily overlooked, easily navigated around, easily forgotten. Yet, I wasn't leaving. Not just yet. Sophia, could you get some more ice from the garage? The champagne won't stay chilled, Natalie commanded without even glancing my way. Her voice wafted through the hallway, almost like a background tune, so casual, so authoritative, so rehearsed. I had been in the middle of stowing away the groceries, my hands still tinged with onion skins and the scent of plastic bags. Nolan was already pouring another glass for Uncle Ray, who laughed boisterously and lounged in Dad's old recliner, as if it were his throne. That same recliner Dad used to doze off in after mowing the lawn. Now, it cradled Nolan's shape, his drink, and his laughter. They've really done a fantastic job revamping the place, he remarked. Natalie beamed. It definitely needed a woman's touch. I wiped my hands on my jeans and carried the ice down the hallway. The garage light flickered as it always did. The aged freezer rattled when I opened it, revealing half-empty trays of meat, popsicles for Ellie and Jordan, and a bag of frozen peas that probably hadn't moved since Mom passed. I cleared a spot and placed the ice on top. My throat felt parched. I shut the lid slowly, careful as if it might break with swifter movements. Back in the kitchen, the countertop glimmered with wine glasses. Natalie had arranged a Texas-shaped cheese board, indulging her flair for dramatics and taste impressions. Keep the kids away from the marble tray, it scratches easily, she cautioned. I remained silent as Mia assisted Ethan with his math worksheet at the table's end, sharing 2 pencils, one of which had a broken eraser. As Natalie's daughter, Ellie, danced through in her ballet flats, she snatched a cheese cube and plopped onto the white couch without a care to wipe her hands. No one said anything. You're too good, Sophia, Uncle Ray called out. You run this place like clockwork. Natalie laughed. She definitely has a knack for chores. It wasn't meant as a genuine compliment. It never was. After depositing the empty grocery bags into the bin, I returned and began slicing strawberries for a fruit salad, not because anyone asked, but because there was always something that needed attention, and I had learned that keeping busy was a safeguard against emotional pain. "Natalie, can we go into the living room?" Mia whispered. "Not with food, sweetie," Natalie replied sweetly. "The rug's just been cleaned." Ethan looked up from his homework. "But Ellie knows the rules," he chimed in. "Don't worry about her," Natalie dismissed. Ethan glanced my way, and I gave a discreet nod. It wasn't worth the argument. I blended the fruit with a wooden spoon while the kitchen clock ticked louder than necessary. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, casting lines across the tile. I reflected on the countless nights I had mopped this floor barefoot after everyone else had turned in for the night. "This is truly impressive," Uncle Ray commented again, this time to Nolan. "You both have transformed it into a home." He added, "And Natalie, you've always been the sensible one." His words hit me unexpectedly. I wasn't shocked, though. I was the one who took care of the bills, arranged repairs, and called pest control when the attic smelled rotten. Yet, she reaped the praise, adorned the house with wine bottles and picture-perfect centerpieces. I brought the fruit bowl out to the deck and placed it on the table. Just as I was about to grab a spoon, Ellie dipped her fingers into the bowl. "Please use a spoon," I requested gently. She rolled her eyes in annoyance. "It's just fruit," she retorted. Natalie remained silent, as Nolan handed her another glass. "Try the rose," he urged. She took a sip and chuckled, "It's floral, like spring in a bottle." Ethan reached for a piece of cantaloupe, but Nolan blocked him with the tongs. "Let's wait until everyone's had a turn, bud." That word "bud" again, it made my jaw clench tightly. Mia stood next to me, and I could see she was fighting back tears. She detested crowds, loud sounds, and being perceived as a problem. I gently placed my hand on her shoulder and leaned in closer. "How about we grab a plate and sit outside?" She silently nodded in agreement. We settled on the porch steps, our legs curled to the side. In the distance, the neighbors' wind chimes tinkled, creating the backdrop for what should have been a serene evening. Yet that calm eluded me as I held my breath. "I hate it here," Mia murmured. I tucked her hair behind her ear as I replied, "I know." "Will we ever have our own place?" The question weighed heavily on me, like a stone in my chest. "One day," I replied, noticing the porch light flicker on. It cast a cozy glow upon the steps where our scarcely touched plates rested. Laughter echoed behind us once more, another toast, another show, another reminder that I was always on the sidelines, picking up the pieces. Standing up, I took our plates back inside. In the kitchen, the champagne bottle was almost empty. Natalie stood at the sink, humming softly as she cleaned up brie scraps. Initially, she didn't notice my presence, but then I heard her voice drift from the dining room, low yet clear. "They're just passing through," she commented. "This house will be mine soon, anyway. Sophia, can you lower the washer noise? The guests are trying to sleep." Her tone last night was devoid of anger, merely dismissive, as though I was just a noisy tenant in her establishment. Glancing at the clock, it registered 9:47 p.m. I wasn't even running a full wash cycle. I was merely rinsing Mia's school uniform for the next day. The washer rattled lightly, almost as if it were apologizing. Our room used to serve as a laundry space, but now it's where the three of us share a small space. One twin bed for me, and a mattress on the floor for Ethan and Mia. The walls are so thin that I can hear Natalie's TV through the vent, the laughter of her husband, the whir of their ceiling fan, the clinking of glasses. No matter how much I try to air it out, the room always carries the scent of detergent. When the dryer runs, the intense heat turns our space into a sauna, but I tell the kids it's cozy. Sometimes, I even believe it myself. Mia was engrossed in coloring at the little fold-out table we rescued from a yard sale. Her crayons were worn down to stubs. Ethan lay on his back, buried in a library book, flashlight in hand. "Mom," Mia asked softly, Why don't we use the guest room anymore? I feigned busy folding laundry. Because Aunt Natalie's kids sleep there now, remember? They have rooms upstairs. They're just visiting, honey. Mia frowned, but they've been visiting for 2 years. I had no reply. When we first returned, that guest room was ours, basking in morning sunlight, with soft carpet beneath our feet and a view of the backyard my father had cultivated himself. That weekend, Natalie's kids wanted to play hotel, and I agreed when she promised they'd stay a few days. You can move back after. That was 2 birthdays ago, and their posters still adorn the walls. Their toys fill the closet, while my old boxes, photos, and tax documents sit alongside Mom's apron, stacked in the hallway. Ethan glanced at Paige as his flashlight beam wobbled. "It's okay, Mom," he reassured me. "We don't need a big room." I smiled, though my throat tightened at the bittersweet words. "I know, sweetheart." He returned to his book, and I continued folding, shirt, towel, jeans, repeat. Each crease felt like a muscle memory from a life that didn't feel like my own. Laughter from Natalie echoed down the hallway again, bright and carefree. I could almost discern the words hidden in those tones. Comfortable people chatted about matters that didn't involve me. Occasionally, I envisioned what my parents would think of our situation, Dad with his steady hands, Mom with her fierce sense of justice. I used to believe she'd never let anyone take advantage of me, but she was gone, taking that fairness with her. "Mom," Mia said again, her voice tremulous. "Are we poor?" The last word cracked, making the room suddenly feel constricted. The dryer hummed loudly in the tense quiet between us. Setting the laundry down, I turned to her. "Why do you ask?" "Aunt Natalie said we should be thankful we get to live here for free." I froze. When did she say that? "Yesterday," Mia answered. She was on the phone and didn't know I was listening. I knelt beside her and reassured her, "We're not poor, sweetheart. We're rebuilding." She tilted her head quizzically. "What does that mean?" "It means we have the strength to start over, even when it's tough." Her eyes glistened, but she nodded as if she understood. Kids often grasp more than we realize. She returned to her coloring, while I sat on the edge of the bed, folding a towel that didn't actually need folding. My hands moved just to keep busy. A heavy weight settled in my chest. In that moment, I felt a fatigue that wasn't just physical, but something deeper. I reflected on the years I had spent meticulously paying bills, being reliable, and just showing up. I thought about how one bad marriage and one illness could constrict a whole life down to the confines of a simple laundry room. The dryer's hum gradually diminished before finally shutting off. Tranquility enveloped the room. I exhaled and leaned against the cool wall, recalling how my father used to store his old tool chest right in this spot. The familiar scents of sawdust and motor oil flooded my mind. He always preferred to repair things on his own rather than trust repairmen. "People will charge you to forget what you already know," he'd often remind me. I yearned for that kind of insight, the invaluable wisdom he offered, devoid of any cost. I began organizing the lower cabinet, aiming to create space for Mia's school shoes. As I moved a box of detergent and a broken hanger aside, my fingers brushed against something flat and papery. Curiously, I pulled it out, a petite bundle of yellowed envelopes bound by a brittle rubber band. My father's familiar handwriting sprawled across the top envelope that read, "Property Records/Herrera Estate." I slowly sank onto the floor. The envelopes felt warm from the residual heat of the dryer. Flipping the first envelope over revealed it was sealed, stamped, and postmarked from the year of his passing. A shift in the air around me made me glance toward the door, half expecting Natalie to rush in and snatch it away, but it was only the sound of Ethan's gentle breathing and Mia crunching away with her crayon. Gingerly, I eased the rubber band off and freed one letter. Inside were legal documents, typed pages featuring my father's name along with a lawyer's signature and even some with my own name. My heart raced as comprehension dawned on me. The contents were property documents, deeds, evidence of ownership, and notes on the equitable division of the estate among heirs. He had preserved everything, each receipt, every clause, every signature, and someone had hidden it all away. I stared at the papers until my vision blurred with emotion. My father had put his faith in the system, and that very system had quietly transferred his promises into unfamiliar hands. I carefully returned the letters to their envelopes and cradled them to my chest. Mia looked up with curiosity. "What's that?" she inquired. "Just something Grandpa left behind," I replied gently. "Can I see it?" she asked eagerly. "Not yet," I answered. Just then, her crayon broke with a sudden snap, causing both of us to jump. She smiled subtly, as if she sensed that profound changes were afoot. I tucked the envelopes under my pillow, their weight feeling electric, small yet potent enough to alter the narrative of a home built on someone else's history. When the hallway light flickered once more, I didn't flinch. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel like an intruder in my own home. I felt invigorated. I rifled through everything. My cousin Lily said, "If there was a copy of your dad's will, it's absent from Mom's files." I gripped the phone firmly to my ear, my fingers still damp from washing the dishes. "Are you sure?" I questioned. "Absolutely," she confirmed. "But remember, Natalie had power of attorney toward the end, right?" I stared blankly at the calendar on the fridge, every date of that year unmarked, just an indistinct blur of bills, meals, and silence. "She took care of the hospice paperwork," I murmured. "Exactly," Lily replied. I remained silent. "You should check the county archive," Lily suggested. "There's bound to be some record. Even if it's just the filing." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Thanks." After we hung up, I lingered at the sink, my hands still wet. I dried them on the fraying towel Mia had used to wipe the juice stains off the table earlier that day. That night, once everyone was asleep, I retrieved the letters from beneath my pillow and laid them out on the table, piece by piece, like a puzzle I'd been hesitant to solve. My father's handwriting was meticulous. Even after all this time, I could hear his voice emphasizing the need for even splits. Both daughters, joint custodianship, yet the actual will was missing, no notarized copy, no stamped page, just a path lined with unfinished intentions. I leaned back in my chair, allowing the quietness to wash over me. If you have ever faced the dilemma of choosing between safeguarding your peace or confronting hurt, I understand the rationale behind your silence. But sometimes, that very silence can cost far more than the truth. If you relate, hit the like button. If you've ever been in a position where you're the only one asking questions, subscribe to share your story with me. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I'm eager to discover how many of us are still out here in search of answers that others wish to remain hidden. The following morning, I dropped the kids off at school and headed straight to the county office, skipping breakfast and foregoing coffee. I brought nothing more than a folder of letters and a deep, unsettling feeling in my stomach, aware that something had been overlooked. The building exuded a beige, boxy facade and the musty scent of old paper. A woman behind the glass called my name, and I stepped forward. "Hi, I'm looking for estate records for my father," I stated. Without making eye contact, she handed me a form. "Fill this out. We'll call your number." I situated myself at the back, meticulously filling in every detail: name, Richard Herrera, date of death, known associates, known heirs, known addresses. Each line felt like a potential key to unlocking buried memories I wasn't ready to confront. After 32 long minutes, my number was finally called. The clerk was a young woman, probably in her early 20s, sporting a red scrunchie on her wrist and a weary expression in her eyes. "What's the reason for your request?" she inquired. "I'm looking for a will," I replied. "I was never given one. I simply want to find out if there's one filed." She nodded, tapping on her keyboard. "Could you please repeat the name?" "Richard Herrera," I answered. Her nails clicked rhythmically against the keys. Then she paused, looking intently at the screen. There's a file here. I leaned in closer. She continued scrolling. It appears a will was registered about 2 months before his passing. My heart skipped a beat. Can I take a look at it? Her eyes narrowed slightly. It's been amended. Amended? I echoed in disbelief. She kept scrolling. Yes. It was refiled with a new date and signed by a different attorney than the original one. I tightened my grip on the counter's edge. What attorney? David S. Lambert, she read aloud. That name didn't ring a bell with me. Are copies available? I asked eagerly. We can request a certified copy, she replied. It may take a few business days. I'll pay for it right now, I said determinedly. She passed me a payment slip. With trembling hands, I signed the receipt. Once back in my car, I sat in the parking lot with the windows up, the air thick and stale, but I didn't open them. Natalie never mentioned a second will or another lawyer. She just moved in, took charge, and started making me feel like an intruder in my own home. Now it made sense. Someone had rewritten the narrative while I was still mourning, and they hadn't bothered to inform me. I turned the ignition key and headed straight to Lily's. She lived in a rundown one-bedroom duplex with a leaky roof and a landlord who ignored her messages. She brewed me a cup of tea and waited patiently. It's amended, I revealed. Filed by someone named Lambert. I don't know him. Lily frowned. That's not the lawyer your dad used for the trust affairs. I recall he had an old guy, Becker. Yeah, I called Becker's office this morning. He's retired, and I didn't get a response. Lily bit her lip thoughtfully. Do you think Natalie had the power of attorney? We lapsed into silence. Would you like me to come with you when the papers arrive? She offered. No, not yet, I declined. That night, sleep eluded me once more. I sat on the edge of my bed while Mia snored softly beside me and Ethan mumbled in his dreams. The pile of letters was again tucked under my pillow. The dryer rattled once before going silent. I remained still, replaying that one sentence over and over in my mind. There was indeed a will, but it had been amended by a lawyer I hadn't chosen. I had never come across the name David S. Lambert before. I pronounced it aloud just to feel its weight. It sounded foreign, unlike Becker, my father's lawyer for over 10 years, or the paralegal whose name was stamped on all our financial documents growing up. Lambert felt off, like a hastily made-up name. I opened my laptop and typed it in. The search yielded just one blurry result: Lambert and Associates, Family and Estate Law. The office was marked permanently closed, no website, no reviews, merely a disconnected number and an address hidden behind a strip mall off I-20. The building used to be a tax preparation place. Faint memories resurfaced from when the kids were younger. We would stop at the dollar store next door for school supplies. I dialed the number anyway, just in case. The phone rang once and then beeped. We're sorry. This number is no longer in service. I leaned back in my chair, puzzled. If this was the attorney who amended my father's will, why did it feel as if he had evaporated the instant the ink dried? I tried searching the Bar Association website. No leads. I even searched for David S. Lambert in relation to estate fraud. Nothing useful turned up, just another ghost of a lawyer in a realm where names held tremendous significance. I fired off an email to Lily, relaying what I found and expressing my unease, that it felt like something was hidden right in front of us. She quickly replied, one line. Start with the notary records. Every will needs one. So, I pulled up the scanned copy of the amended will from the county clerk's email. I had read it multiple times already, but this time I scrutinized the corner, focusing on the notary seal. The stamp was pristine yet incomplete, listing a name, Stephanie Cole. The signature beneath it didn't match anything I had seen before. I searched for her next and found an address, a P.O. box 2 counties away. That was all I discovered. The more I examined, the more discrepancies I found. The dates seemed odd. My father's original will was allegedly replaced 5 weeks before his death during a critical decline. I had stayed with him nearly every day during that period. No meetings, no documents, no visitors in tailored suits. Yet, there it was, filed, stamped, accepted. I reached for the glass of water next to my laptop. My hand trembled as I lifted it. How many more pieces had I overlooked? How many other spaces had they emptied while I was still there? I sat on the floor and retrieved the old folder once again, containing every record I had saved, every handwritten note. I lined them up, starting to compare them meticulously, line by line, signature by signature. My father's typical are used to curve in a loop. Now, in the revised will, it jutted abruptly at the top. It seemed minor, yet deep down, I sensed something my eyes hadn't yet voiced. This wasn't written by him. I recalled how his fingers would shake in those last months. He couldn't even sign a get well card for Ethan without my assistance. This was not his signature. I picked up the envelope containing the revised will and examined it closely. The paper felt thick and flawless, far too immaculate for what it purported to contain. Suddenly, the door slammed open behind me. Ethan stood there, his cheeks flushed and wet. "Hey," I said, rising quickly. "What's going on?" He dropped his backpack. "Aunt Natalie told Ellie I wasn't really family." My heart sank. "What?" "She said I was just a visitor. That I'm not a Herrera anymore since Dad left." He stumbled over the word left. "Ellie told everyone I was just here out of pity." My heart twisted painfully. I approached him and knelt down. "Listen to me," I said, keeping my tone gentle. "You are my son. You belong to the Herrera family. This is your family. This is your home," I affirmed. "It's her house," he murmured. "She said it has always been hers." I shut my eyes. I had spent the day dissecting timelines and signatures, and now my child was in tears because the people I lived with seemed intent on erasing him as well. I drew him close, feeling his tears soak my neck. "She doesn't get to determine who you are," I declared firmly. "We do," he nodded, although his breath still caught in his throat. I led him to the couch and offered him the soft blanket we kept there. His fingers gripped it as if it were the only solid thing left in the universe. I settled beside him, but my gaze remained fixed on the folder, burdened with its implications, the truths it could reveal, the truths it already bore. If they were willing to erase me from a signature, they could certainly dismiss him with just a word, a glance, a whispered comment behind closed doors. But I wouldn't permit that. Not any longer. "Sophia, could you not make this about you for one night?" That was Natalie's comment in the kitchen after dinner. After cleaning up my children's half-finished plates while others laughed over dessert they had not offered to me, I stayed silent. I remained quiet when Ellie called me clingy in front of the cousins. I didn't say anything as Nolan interrupted me 3 times consecutively, nor when Uncle Ray toasted Natalie for being the glue of the family. I merely smiled, holding my breath through the clattering of forks and observing as Ethan fiddled with his napkin instead of eating. Once it wrapped up, I grabbed my purse, exited through the back door, and climbed into the driver's seat. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly that I lost feeling in my fingers. My chest felt like it was packed with glass. I locked the doors and sat still in silence. No radio, no movement, just my breath and the soft whir of the engine cooling off. I contemplated driving away, abandoning the dishes, bills, signatures, and names that I didn't recognize but somehow still tethered me to my life. I could go to Lily's. We could disappear into a cheap rental with peeling linoleum and no memories embedded in the walls. I could vanish. But as I rummaged through the glove box for a tissue, something fluttered out. Folded into quarters, it was a crayon drawing from a child. As I opened it carefully, I could feel the softness of the paper from frequent handling. It depicted a long table with 8 stick figures, 5 seated, three standing behind a large blue rectangle, a thick scribbled outline that read glass. Mia had sketched it, illustrating all of us at the table. Me, her, and Ethan, divided, watching, silent, merely existing behind something that no one else recognized. I pressed the drawing to my chest and shut my eyes. If you've ever felt invisible until the moment you were gone, perhaps it's time for them to see the truth instead. Maybe it's time to stop playing nice, to stop being grateful for crumbs. If you feel that energy too, share it. Let me know where you're from. Make sure they recognize that we're still here. I carefully folded the drawing and placed it back. My fingers trembled less as I reached for my phone and began typing. Forensic handwriting analyst near El Paso. Estate document verification. I pressed search, then call. It's not his, said the handwriting expert with calm assurance. No dramatics, just straightforward truth. She slid the copy of the revised will back to me and brought out two earlier documents I'd sent her, an old bank form and a durable power of attorney my dad signed before any hospice paperwork initiated. The slant is off. The spacing is tight here but wide over there. The loop in his H is completely missing. I can put this in writing, but anyone trained could see it, she explained. I nodded once, afraid to speak, as if anything I said might spill something sharp. There's a specific kind of silence that settles in when something within you shifts irrevocably. That was the silence I carried with me as I walked out of that dimly lit office into the glaring brightness of a world that suddenly felt unfamiliar. The folder I held felt surprisingly light compared to the heavy truth it contained, as if the burden had shifted straight into my chest instead. I expressed my gratitude, paid with cash, and stepped out of the office, clutching the folder like it was a matchbook in a parched forest. I didn't hesitate. Upon reaching home, I didn't even bother to remove my shoes. I dumped my bag at the entryway and instinctively headed to the garage. Something inside me had awakened, agitated, and while not seeking vengeance just yet, I craved clarity. I moved with purpose, rummaging through the garage bins filled with tax returns, land deeds, and birth certificates. My parents may not have been extravagant, but they were meticulous. Each document had its designated spot. Every spot had a label, and each label revealed the truth. I started pulling out old file boxes, stacking them haphazardly against the wall. I could almost smell the passage of time on the paper, the ink faded, edges curled, corners stiffened by age. I spread them out on the laundry room floor, comparing signatures as if piecing together a detective's puzzle. In many ways, I was solving a mystery. Every letter's curve revealed something new. Every stroke bore a fingerprint I had previously overlooked. I wasn't merely searching for what existed, I was investigating what had been erased, altered, subtly rewritten. Bit by bit, the pieces fell into place. Gradually and intentionally, I unearthed the original will, dated, signed, notarized. Its language was simple, unambiguous, dividing assets equally among children. The handwriting was unmistakable, clean and slanting to the left, just like his workshop notes, reminiscent of the notes he'd tuck in my lunchbox during my teenage years when I felt invisible at home. Then I pulled out the revised version, the one Natalie had proudly presented in court. At first glance, it appeared identical, same font, same tone, but the signature lacked the same energy. The hesitance in the pen lift felt off. My heartbeat didn't spike, but my fingers tightened around the edge of that page, as if they had been yearning to grasp something substantial. But I wasn't finished. I sifted through utility bills, joint property disclosures, and insurance forms, laying them out like a tapestry of truth, weaving connections one thread at a time. It felt as though I was witnessing a lie unravel itself backwards. Each document indicated division. Each letter proclaimed equality. Each date traced back to a moment before Natalie declared the house hers. Before renovations took place, before the firm was hired for asset consolidation advice, before the notary changed and the hard drive went missing, before I was told to remain silent for family harmony. It was akin to walking backward through a tempest only to discover the sky had always been clear. Yet, someone kept rattling the windows, trying to convince me otherwise. That night, sleep eluded me. I made duplicates. I recorded names. I began an organized folder with 3 sections: real, forged, and missing. My handwriting was steady as I labeled each one, devoid of any tremors, echoing the way he taught me when I was 10 and anxious about forming my letters right. Write as if it matters, he would say, even when no one was observing. Now, it felt like someone's eyes were on me. I cross-referenced Natalie's emails during the estate settlement. Her wording had been ambiguous, mentioning new developments in relation to the revised document. Back then, I assumed I had overlooked a family discussion. Now, I recognized it for what it truly was, a silent hand tugging the tablecloth before the dishes could even touch the table. The word missing loomed larger. Crucial documents that should have been archived had vanished. The family accountant's records were gone. The voicemail from my uncle, confirming the original will had been sent to him for safekeeping, was erased, or so he claimed. Yet he couldn't explain how I possessed a printed transcript of it from 2 years prior. I glanced at the wall clock around 2 a.m. It ticked on, unchanged. The only transformation was within me. I had stopped questioning if something was amiss. I was now compiling proof that it indeed was. I printed the handwriting analysis report and placed it in a clear sleeve. I also printed Natalie's email, alongside photocopies of the 2 wills, laying them strategically side by side. One was simply a document, while the other represented her decision. I added another tab to the folder timeline. Everything I uncovered had a start, not just the lie's beginning, but the decision behind telling it. She hadn't rushed, she had executed her plan meticulously, crafting her narrative, primed her language, awaiting the opportune moment when the right individuals were weary, distracted, or too polite to resist. Yet she overlooked one crucial fact: some of us were raised to pay attention to details, the overlooked comma, the altered font, the loop in the H. I affixed a note to the folder before slipping it back into the fireproof lockbox, reading simply, "Truth isn't noisy, it's precise." I then sat in the hallway for a while, not in prayer, nor plotting, just breathing. The truth doesn't care who believes it, it merely waits. And I was undaunted by the wait. The word missing continued to expand. The following morning, when everyone else was out and about, I took a trip into the master bedroom. I convinced myself I was merely there to vacuum and smooth out the sheets. But there it was, the drawer of Natalie's vanity, slightly ajar. Curiosity got the best of me, and I opened it. Inside, between a bottle of rose oil and her lipstick case, I spotted a ring box covered in worn velvet, a soft blue. It was my mother's ring, the one she had cherished for 50 years, the very one Natalie claimed had slipped off while she was hospitalized and was now lost for good. I didn't reach for it, I just stood transfixed, my hands growing numb as I gazed at it. Finally, I closed the drawer, stepped back, and quietly acknowledged the truth I had already grasped: she had taken more than just documents. Make sure to thank Natalie before you head out. She does so much. Uncle Ray remarked, a plate piled high in his lap, barely glancing up from his meatloaf. Mia had prepped about half the sides, and Ethan handled vacuuming the living room. I'd set the table and baked cornbread, yet all the accolades flowed to Natalie, the one hosting. I smiled. At that moment, I decided to stop reacting. I didn't argue back, I ceased to defend my position. Instead, I switched to observation. From then on, I began watching everything closely. I created a new folder titled House Admin on my desktop, populated it with subfolders named Proofs, Receipts, Statements, and Recordings. I wasn't out for disputes, I needed solid proof. Each snarky comment Natalie made at dinner? Jotted down. Every instance Nolan referred to our home as if I weren't even there? Screenshotted from the group chat. Any bank notification containing only her name? Saved. I even purchased a small audio recorder, but not for capturing arguments. There hadn't been any, and that would have been easier. No, I recorded the silences, the moments where they completely overlooked me. People forget when you're silent, it makes them negligent. During the next dinner, I brought peach cobbler in a foil tray. Natalie chuckled and remarked, a tad rustic, but adorable. I simply said, thanks, and noted the date, time, and her tone. That same week, I reached out to an old name I hadn't used in quite a while, Doris Marsh, the notary who once helped my father with every financial document before his tremors made it too challenging. Though retired, her number still worked. Sophia, she greeted, it's been so long. I mentioned I was reviewing old estate documents, asking about the final will, particularly one bearing her name and seal that was dated for a time I knew she hadn't been present. She paused briefly and then requested, send me a photo. I complied. An hour later, she returned my call. This isn't mine, she stated. The seal is incorrect. They used a duplicate, and it's off-center. My stamp has a ridge from an old crack, and this signature? It's not how I write. I gripped my phone tighter. You didn't notarize this. I've never met Natalie, and I absolutely didn't sign that will. Please tell me you didn't buy those cupcakes. That was the very first thing Natalie said when she laid eyes on the bakery box in my hands. Her tone dripped with that sing-song judgment she favored when she wanted her criticism to masquerade as advice. They're from Bartlett's, I replied, smiling. I thought we deserved a treat. She blinked, then shifted her attention to the grill without another word. Nolan was already pouring drinks, while Ellie set paper plates on the folding table, the same one where last year Mia had to wait until the real guests had indulged. This year, I didn't ask for approval. I placed a plate for Ethan and Mia right in the center. No one moved them. I wore a neatly pressed button-down and slacks rather than my usual jeans, even my hair was straightened. Subtle, yet different enough for Natalie to notice. You look dressed up, she commented at one point while passing by with a tray of sausages. I nodded, implying it was a special day. She laughed, unsure of what I meant. It wasn't until halfway through the afternoon that the atmosphere changed. Everyone had eaten, and the children were off giggling near the fence while playing a game that involved kicking pine cones. Nolan was deep in a long-winded story about refinancing. I found myself by the cooler, sipping lemonade alongside my friend Karina, the +1 nobody dared question. Working for an estate attorney, her eyes were like steel, hidden behind soft lashes. Natalie joined us across the table, balancing a wine glass in one hand and a phone in the other. I can't believe we've maintained the house so well, considering its age. Dad would be proud, she remarked. Karina offered a polite smile, it's lovely. I added nonchalantly, I had the will reviewed recently. My eyes stayed focused on my lemonade rather than on her, adopting a casual tone akin to discussing the weather. Natalie hesitated. What will? I reiterated, Dad's, just to understand it better. It's fascinating what people try to conceal in legal documents. Karina shifted slightly beside me, just her presence felt like support. I'm sorry, what are you talking about? Natalie chuckled, but it had a strained quality to it. I pointed out that there were some discrepancies. Some of the signatures didn't align, and, apparently, the notary on file claimed she never met you. Mid-sentence, Nolan fell silent. Uncle Ray raised his head from where he was sitting. I'm not sure what you're suggesting, Sophia, he said. Nothing for now, I replied. Just then, Natalie's wine glass slipped from her grasp and shattered on the patio. Could everyone come inside for a moment? Sophia has something to say before we slice the cake, she said with a tone that was light, almost too sweet, a tone often used when one tries to hide the panic of a morning spent drenched in wine-stained anxiety. I stood by the fireplace, a folder clutched in my hand. The living room was packed with people, Uncle Ray, Aunt Marlene, Lily, Nolan, Ellie, Jordan, some cousins from Fort Worth, and a few neighbors. We were supposed to toast to Nolan's birthday, 50 years, complete with balloons, sliders, and family. Yet, I had requested just 5 minutes before dessert. Just 5. Natalie called it a small speech. Her smile suggested she didn't expect anything serious, as if she believed nobody would dare to spoil her celebration. I cleared my throat. Without a drink in hand, just paper, I began, "Thanks for allowing me a moment. I know we're gathered here to celebrate Nolan, and we will, but it's crucial that I share something before we proceed." Nolan chuckled. "You didn't have to prepare a speech, Jules." I returned his smile. "Actually, I didn't prepare a speech," I said as I opened the folder and revealed the first page. I had come across letters Dad wrote towards the end, some of which had never been opened. They detailed his wishes for this house and what he expected of us. The room fell silent. I kept my focus on the page. I also had the will examined, not just the version that was filed but the original Dad wrote prior to entering hospice, the one that had vanished. Aunt Marlene shifted uncomfortably on the couch. It turns out there was a sudden amendment, dated mere weeks before he died, but the signatures didn't match. I looked up to assert, "They don't match because they aren't his." Natalie stepped closer. "Sophia, I'm not done here." I held up the forensic report. "This comes from a certified handwriting analyst. It confirms what I suspected. The amended will, which removed my name from ownership, is forged." Nolan made a slight coughing sound, but it didn't develop into anything more. I flipped the page. I also spoke with Doris Marsh, the notary associated with the amended document. She confirmed she never met Natalie, she didn't witness the signatures, nor did she stamp the document. Natalie crossed her arms, defensively. "That woman is almost 80. "She's also exceptionally sharp," I replied, "and her old seal does not match the one used on that will, the one you presented." The atmosphere in the room felt heavy, as if the air thickened among the gathering. "I also have Dad's original instructions," I stated, lifting another page. "He wanted this house split equally between both daughters, 50-50ths, no amendments or secrecy." Lily leaned in. "Wait, so what we saw was a fabrication?" I nodded. "Filed through a closed law firm, complete with a fake notary and a forged signature." Aunt Marlene gasped, covering her mouth. "I understand this is a lot to take in," I said gently. "But it's important for everyone to grasp the truth. What has happened to me and my children is not just a misunderstanding, it's theft." I focused on Natalie, her lips tightly pressed, her complexion pale. Nolan opened his mouth, but no words came out. Lily whispered something to her husband, and he glanced downward. "Dad believed we would all act ethically," I explained. "I have spent the last year feeling like a guest in a home he intended for me. I've been told to wait my turn, watching my children face humiliation, all while I remained silent, thinking that might preserve the peace." I allowed that to resonate for a moment. No one stirred. Yet silence does not create peace, it perpetuates lies. Natalie slowly shook her head. "You're distorting this situation." I nodded in expectation. "That's why I brought evidence." I passed Lily a folder filled with copies, the deed, side-by-side signatures, the notary's letter, the expert's statement. She flipped through them, her brows furrowing. Aunt Marlene broke into tears. Finally, Nolan said, "Sophia, perhaps we should discuss this later." "Absolutely not," I replied. "We will address it now." I turned to everyone present. "You've all seen me take on the role of caretaker in a home that belongs to both of us. You've praised Natalie for looking after things while I scrubbed floors and raised my children in a laundry room. No one can deny that. You assumed I remained silent out of weakness, but I stayed quiet because I was gathering what I needed. I took a deep breath, my final breath, and I want you to hear this from me before any lawyer does." Natalie inched forward. "Are you really going through with this?" "Yes," I affirmed, because I didn't need to shout. "The truth is loud enough." She didn't blink. Nolan glanced at her, and for the first time, I noticed something shift. The uncertainty on his face revealed a flaw in their flawless facade. A fork clanged against a plate. "I'm moving back into the master bedroom next week," I shared softly. "You'll notice the locks have been changed." Then I smiled, a weary, faint smile, and stepped outside. "Do you really believe you have the right to the entire house now?" That was the final remark Natalie directed at me face to face. It wasn't a question or a plea, it was her usual icy, emotionless tone for when the pretense dropped. I remained silent, merely handing over the signed documents to her attorney, allowing the stillness to convey my thoughts. The house was now ours, legally shared. My name was restored on the deed, while Natalie, with her elegant wine glasses and silk robes, had 30 days to vacate. As she departed, she didn't hug a soul, not even Nolan. The moving truck left just before dusk, and I stood behind the screen door, watching it turn the corner like an old chapter closing. I didn't wave goodbye. Mia was the first to speak, asking, "Is it really just us now?" "Just us," I confirmed. Ethan stood a bit taller. He didn't say a whole lot, but his shoulders dropped subtly, exuding a sense of release like someone who had been holding their breath for too long. That evening, I made a full meal, not just a token dish, not leftover scraps. I roasted chicken with lemon, baked fresh rolls, set up cloth napkins, and even lit a candle I saved from last Mother's Day. I served the kids first. No one uttered a word about it. They didn't need to. They ate as though they truly belonged, because they absolutely did. After rinsing and stacking the dishes, I accessed the hall closet and retrieved the old frame wrapped in a soft towel. The photo had been concealed beneath winter coats and a broken umbrella, not forgotten, merely hidden, awaiting discovery. It captured my mother's favorite moment, a black and white image of her mid-laugh, hand on my dad's shoulder. The very photo Natalie had deemed out of place with the decor. I hung it back near the hallway light switch, just where it belonged. I stepped back to admire her laughing face, frozen in time, as if she knew this moment would come and patiently awaited my arrival. If you've ever waited long enough for your turn, perhaps it's time you took a seat at the table you helped create. And maybe that seat was always there, just waiting for you to pull it out and take your place like you belong. We didn't have a celebration that night. We lived freely, without anyone watching or correcting us. The next morning, I painted the master bedroom a soft spring green while Mia taped the baseboards and Ethan carried boxes, all in quiet harmony. Sunlight filled the kitchen, and the house felt like it was finally breathing again. I found an old blue dress that still smelled of lavender and hung it just because I could. I unpacked my books, no order required, and found a note I once wrote, "Don't shrink just because they squint." The kids set up their room without fighting. Mia laid a blanket as a border. Ethan wrote "No socks here" on his drawer. That night, we made soup. Mia called it freedom stew. Peace, I realized, lives in the small things, a shared laugh, a door left open, a chipped thrift store vase. I started writing again on scraps of paper. I am not who they claimed I was. Mia asked to plant herbs. Ethan began sketching. He drew our house and labeled it Mom's Fortress. Every Thursday, we went to the library. Soon, I was reading stories aloud to children. Later, I picked up painting again, not for display, but for myself. Quietly, gently, life began to bloom. Sometimes Sophia called just to check on me. She never asked for details, just, "You good?" and I'd reply, "Getting there." That was enough. The kitchen began to smell of safety, not just meals, and I caught myself humming again. At night, I'd peek in on the kids, their soft breathing a reminder of peace. One morning, I planted a rose bush by the porch, blush pink, my mother's favorite. Mr. Hammond said it wouldn't survive the frost, but I knew it would. When it blooms, everyone will see it, just as I do from the kitchen window. This yard once felt temporary, now it feels like home. I'm no longer fueled by anger or the need to explain. The truth stands on its own. The house is officially mine now, half set aside for the kids. No celebration, just quiet certainty that I've reclaimed what was lost. Natalie's gone, Nolan still drives by without stopping, and that's fine. In the attic, I found my mother's postcard. You don't need to be loud to be strong. You only need to endure. She understood long before I did. Tonight, I sip tea in the kitchen, the windows open to the scent of lilacs and cut grass. Upstairs, the kids' laughter drifts down. This is our home. And for the first time, I don't need anyone to tell me I belong.